Hey guys, welcome back to Jessin Reads Romance. I'm Jessin, and today I'm going to be doing my weekly wrap-up for the third week in March. Wow, Ollie just lays down. Are you comfy? Are you comfy, buddy? Oh, big yawn. Okay. Anyway, I'm going to be wrapping up the third week in March. A lot of these books were on my Kindle Clear Out Readathon list, and I did do a vlog for that. It's actually a two-parter, so it's quite long. I am going to be briefly going over these books again, but there is a vlog where I go through all of my feelings, the ups and downs, and all of that detail. So I'll link those down in the description box below in case you want to watch that. So the first book that I read was Ruthless Creatures by J.T. Gessinger. And I picked this book to go on the readathon because this was a second chance author prompt, an author that I read before I didn't really love, and I was going to give this author a second chance. I'm so glad that I did because I really loved Ruthless Creatures. This is a mafia romance, but it's very different. It's very different, and I really loved it because it was like so sweet, and it really didn't happen. There wasn't a ton of mafia politics going on in this one because the heroine was just a regular civilian, and she just so happened to meet him because this guy, Cage, moved in next door to her. So Natalie and her friend were out one night and they saw this guy who is like hot, and they describe him as kind of like very Jason Momoa-esque. He's that tall and just has that presence. And her friend actually approaches him first, and Cage shoots her down. Sloane, she's very like not aggressive, but she's a go-getter. She knows what she wants. Natalie and Sloane have like opposing personalities, so I really like them as friends. I thought that worked really well. And she even tries to be friendly with Cage, and he pretty much shoots her down. He does have an opportunity. I feel like Ollie's like zoning out in the background. What are you doing? What are you doing, bud? Did I disturb you from your nap? Anyway, so Cage does have an opportunity to kind of not come to Natalie's rescue, but she was dating this guy, this cop, who wasn't really taking no for an answer. They broke up earlier, and he came back to apologize, said he thought he made a mistake, and she was like, no, I really do think that we didn't have a connection. Because the problem is, Natalie has been mourning her fiance who's been missing for the past 5 years, and she's still not over it because she doesn't feel like she had closure because they've never found his body. He disappeared on the day of their rehearsal dinner. He went out for a hike and he was never found again. And now that 5 years has passed, her fiance is going to be declared legally dead. And she's really never been able to move on with anybody else, so that's why she was like pushing this cop guy away. But now this guy Cage is showing an interest in her, and he makes some kind of cryptic remarks saying like he's not staying even though he just bought a house. And we can definitely as a reader assume a couple of things about Cage, what his purpose is coming to the small town, being neighbors with Natalie. And yeah, so it's their romance. I thought it was very sweet. I really love Cage. I gave this book 4.5 stars just because at the end, the conflict, I thought there was just a scene, which I can't talk about because it's very spoilery, that I was just like, I don't mind it going this way, but it felt a little bit convoluted in some regards. There was some traveling involved, and I was just like, man, this is a lot of, like, what's the point of this? Anyway, I really enjoyed it, so I can't wait for the next book in the series, which is not out yet. So I'll be waiting for the next book in the Monsters and Queens series, and it is very much teased who the hero and the heroine is going to be. Spoiler, it's Sloane, so I'm excited about that. And I listened to Teach Me by Alexandria House. I listened to this on Audible Plus. Yeah, it was on Audible Plus, which I recently discovered. Thank you, Jen, for telling me about this, that it was included in my Audible subscription. I had no idea about it. So I got this one. This is my first book by Alexandria House before when I did announce my TBR for the Kindle Clear Out Readathon. Heather from Hia Booktubes, she did say that this was not the favorite of people who've read Alexandria House, but I'd already committed because of the trope that's involved, the single dad, and it's also kind of a taboo student-teacher relationship. Turns out it's really not, because he's barely her student. He's her student for like a very small portion of the book, and then he graduates, so that taboo-ness is not there. He is a single dad though, but I just felt like there was way too much going on in this book. There was so much going on. So there was like surprise BDSM. It wasn't telegraphed until the middle of the book. BDSM, lots of cheating, but not with the main couple, but everyone else is a cheater. There was So Nadia has a sister, a half sister, and her mom's very like sexually free. It's a very sex positive book, and her mom had an affair with Nadia's dad. So Nadia's dad was married, and so Nadia has a half brother, and whenever he comes to visit randomly in the book with her dad, who they don't really have a very established relationship. Anyway, Nadia's half brother ends up by falling for Nadia's half sister. They're not related, but they're both related to Nadia. That was a wild thing that happened in that book. There's stalkers, there is deaths, there is drugs, there's blackmail, there is a school shooting. Like it's a lot. It's a lot that happens in this book. So I did not enjoy this book hardly at all. I debated on whether or not to give it a 3 or 2.5 stars, but I'm just going to do 2.5 stars because I don't know why having this much happening in this one little book with a lot of characters who I believe were from other books and other series, like there was just too much, especially for a first time reader of Alexandria House. I didn't enjoy the reading experience, and I was just like, I don't even see the point of this book. I feel like it could have been half the length and it would have been so much more enjoyable. So I'm gonna settle on 2.5 stars for Teach Me. Then I read Some Sort of Crazy by Melanie Harlow. This is the second book in her Happy Crazy Love series, and the series is about 3 sisters, and I do plan on reading the next one in the series because that's a single dad romance, and I'm on like a single dad romance kick right now. But anyway, this book is a friends to lovers romance, and kind of like opposites attract because Miles, the hero, is a man whore, and Natalie is not. She's very committed. She's actually in a relationship with somebody who she's been with since high school. That's really rocky right now. He's dragging his feet on proposing to her. He doesn't want to move in with her, and it just seems like he's not into this relationship anymore. So when Miles comes into town and he's very interested in just what Natalie's up to in her life, she just opened this like diner and he wants to like help her. So when stuff happens between Natalie and her long-term boyfriend, they kind of fall into a friends with benefits relationship. But Miles for the past year has been kind of wondering, like, she's been such a constant in my life, and what if we did get together, and like what are these feelings that I'm having? So I did enjoy their romance. The conflict was a little bit too over the top. I thought we could dial it back a little bit, because it was a really sweet small town romance, and I really ended up by enjoying it, and I definitely want to read the next one in the series. So 4 stars for this one. Next I read When Love Ignites by Rosie Adams. I'm plowing through her Following the Johnson series, and this was an enemies to lovers workplace romance. So Jasmine Johnson is the daughter of the boss, and Alec Alvarez is her co-worker, and they're assigned to this case. There's this really big high profile case where they have to prove that their client did not commit this really gruesome murder. It was his girlfriend. And they're paired together to work together, and Alec does not like Jasmine because he believes that her position in the law firm is the biggest case of nepotism in the world. He doesn't think that Jasmine deserves this place, but she's like, this is such bullshit because you've never given my brothers any shit. They work in this company too. You've only been after me. So I really love the way that Jasmine, she's such a boss. I love her so much, and she was just so cool. I love the conversations that she and Alec have whenever she brings up how unfair he's being to her, and I liked Alec's character once he gets his head out of his ass. It was a really fun romance. There was some drama building in the background with Jasmine's twin brother. He's going through a lot of stuff, and he is the next book in the series. Now, unfortunately, I don't know if I'm going to read the next book in the series because I kind of spoiled myself a little bit. I just wanted to see what his book was called, the brother, right after I finished When Love Ignites. And when I looked on Goodreads, I saw that the series wasn't going to end with the brother who was the last Johnson sibling. There was another book after that, and so I was confused. I was like, well, who's this book about? I looked at the synopsis, and one of my favorite couples in the series is going to be revisited to create some more drama in their life. And as a byproduct, I found out that some more drama is going to happen with Jasmine and Alec. So I was just kind of like, no. So I don't know if I'm going to read the rest of the books in the series because I don't want my characters to be revisited, especially with the storyline that was teased in the spoiler reviews that I read. So, no. But I did like this book. It was a really good book, 4.5 stars. And then for the next prompt, that was Mr. Romance, which is the oldest book on my Kindle by Lisa Raven. This is an interesting kind of like, not escort romance, but kind of. There's this reputation of this guy called Mr. Romance, and he will socialites women who have money, will pay him money to attend events with him, and not much is really known about Mr. Romance. So Eden is a reporter, and she decides to take this on because her job's kind of on the line. This was sort of a slow burn romance, and at the halfway mark, I was unsure whether or not I was going to really believe in this romance, because since this guy he's such a chameleon, he can be so many different people, I was wondering if his actual character, like who he was as a person, not as his Mr. Romance persona, if that was ever going to be explored enough for me to feel satisfied. And all in all, it was. I really did love it. I love their chemistry. And he was so swoony because Eden was kind of like this jaded girl. She was not interested in having long-term relationships. She preferred one-night stands, but he believed in romance. And so that was like such a nice change of pace, and I really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed the things that he was telling her, like what she was worth and just what she should expect, and this is what romance is. And I really loved it. It was really good. So 4.5 stars for Mr. Romance. Then I read The House on the Cerulean Sea. I listened to this book on audio, and it was phenomenal. You should definitely listen to it on audio if you have the chance to. Now this is more of a YA fantasy romance with very little romance in it. His Green Creek series definitely has more romance in it, but I was still satisfied with this book as a whole because the characters were that beautifully written. I love this story. It was whimsical. It's magical. This island with this orphanage that housed like the Antichrist was one of the kids. He was like a 6-year-old named Lucy, short for Lucifer. The kids really made this story. I loved it so much. And Linus as a character, he's like this very like dry piece of toast. In the beginning, he leads this humdrum life, and then he goes to this orphanage, and this is part of his job. He's a caseworker. He goes, make sure that everything's kosher at the orphanages, make sure that no changes need to be made or that the orphanage needs to shut down. And so whenever he approaches this very secretive orphanage and he meets these kids, these very powerful kids, they kind of throw him for a loop, and they also make him question his life and his job, and I really loved it. So there is a romance between Linus and Arthur. Arthur is the master of the orphanage, and I really love them as a couple. I wish we had more romance between them, but I wasn't unsatisfied. I just wish that this was a book that had a little bit more romance in it. So I still love this book. 5 stars for The House on the Cerulean Sea. I love TJ Klune. He's an amazing writer. Then I read An Arc of Scoundrel of My Heart by Lorraine Heath. This is the first book in her Once Upon a Dukedom series, and I really liked it. It has a tie-in to her Sinful Wildflower series, the one with the true loves. I've only read the very last one in the book, and if I had not read the last one in the True Love series, I would not be aware of the connection. But the true loves do feature a little bit in this book, so if you've read that series, you'll see them. If not, it really is not a big deal. They don't feature too prominently, but if you read Beauty Tempts the Beast, then you will 100% recognize who this hero is. This is Griffith, and he is the second son of a duke, and his family is disgraced, and you don't find that out until like the middle of this book, but we already are aware of that in Beauty Tempts the Beast. So we go back in time a little bit, but you're really not aware as the reader because it just kind of like starts off back in time before his family is disgraced. So he's the second son, and he doesn't have a really good relationship with his father. And the heroine, Catherine, is the best friend of his little sister. They really haven't had like a friendship, and that all kind of changes one night. They get to talking and stuff happens, and she ends up by asking him a favor because she needs to marry a titled man, someone with the title, in order to inherit her grandmother's cottage. And this is kind of her last gift from her grandmother, but in her grandmother's eyes, making this a stipulation in her will ensured that Catherine would always be taken care of because she would be marrying a titled gentleman. And that becomes a problem because there's a romance brewing between Griff and Catherine. And it's a really sweet romance, and I really love the idea that Griff comes up with on what kind of establishment he wants to open, because he's planning on opening this club, and it's going to be exclusively for like second sons and spinsters over the age of 25. Basically like everyone who's like on the shelf and forgotten and not like high profile members of the ton. That's what his club's going to be exclusive to. So I really just loved it. I loved Catherine and Griff together. I'm super excited for the next book in the series. I love it. Yeah, I love it, and I need this cover as soon as it comes out. I need it. Then I listened to Say You Still Love Me on audio by K.A. Tucker. This is only the second book by K.A. Tucker that I've read, and this is a second chance romance. And second chance romance is not my favorite trope, hence why I picked it for the readathon, because that was a prompt. And unfortunately, it didn't really work out because I feel like it was too much focus was being dedicated to their previous relationship as kids, when the hero and the heroine were at summer camp when they were 16 and 17 or 17 and 18. No, 16 and 17. So in present day, Piper is working for her dad's like multi-billion-dollar company, and she thinks she sees this guy that she used to know at summer camp down in the lobby, and come to find out he is a new security guard at this building. And so this is when the flashbacks start happening, and we see how Piper and Kyle met, how they had a romance, and why she hasn't heard from him in 13 years. And I just didn't need that much time spent in camp. I would have much rather them dating and getting to know each other in present day, because I didn't feel by the end of the book that I didn't feel like they were a really dynamic couple together. I didn't really feel the love in the present day. So the format of the book just really didn't work for me. 3 stars for that one. And also I didn't love Piper as a character. She was pretty naive, a little bit, I don't know, immature. Didn't really love her as a character. But I really like Kyle. He was nice. So that was it for the Kindle Clear Out Readathon. And I did manage to squeeze in a couple books after that, which was insane. That was an insane amount of books to read in 1 week for me, but the audiobooks helped. And reading a lot of books for the Kindle Clear Out Readathon on audio just allowed me to be able to read more books within a week. So that's a plus for audio. So after the readathon, I immediately jumped on Twisted Cravings by Cora Riley. So Adamo is the last Falcone brother who needed his romance to be explored, and overall I didn't really enjoy this book. So Adamo is into racing. A lot of the setting is like in the Las Vegas desert racing. And this is not really a forbidden romance, even though the heroine is Russian. We find out that she's kind of like the Russian mafia princess who's kind of like slumming it at the race because of reasons. There's a whole plot that is basically a revenge plot on the part of the heroine, Dinara. I think that's how you pronounce her name. And I feel like it was so focused on Dinara and her revenge, and it became this very weird, kind of like a killing spree type of revenge quest, and I didn't enjoy those scenes at all. I also really didn't feel the intense connection between Adamo and Dinara. I thought that Adamo was nice, but also I didn't feel like his character got to be explored that much. We see more of him, and I felt like I knew him more as a child than I did seeing him as an adult. Like, I just felt like there wasn't really life to the Adamo character in his own book, which was crazy. My favorite parts were when we did get to see Ramo and Nino and, you know, all my favorite characters in this series, and it wasn't that much because we spent a lot of time in the desert. And one of my favorite things about the Kimura Chronicles is the family bonds of the Falcone clan. They live in the same mansion and they're all on top of each other and each other's business, and I really like that. And it was just, that element was missing for me, so I really did not enjoy this book. I was incredibly annoyed with Dinara as a character, so I only gave this book 3 stars. I'm ready for her to move on and like kind of like do a reboot with the kids, with the next gen, which I think is going to be called Sins of the Father. Jen knows much more about this than me. I don't know if I want to know a ton about it, but Jen did tease to me who the first book's going to be about. So I'm very excited because I think it's a bodyguard romance, and I love that. I love that. Different social classes. I'm here for it. And then I was able to squeeze in Once and Always by Judith McNaught. This was the historical Hellions pick for March. Unfortunately, I was not able to watch the live show because the live show for the Kindle Clear Out Readathon happened during the same exact time as the historical Hellions, and I had a lot of thoughts about this. So this was the third book by Judith McNaught that I've ever read. The first one that I read was A Kingdom of Dreams, and it's still my favorite by her. Even though that book was only 4.5 stars for me, or 4 stars for me because of some of the conflict at the end. And I feel like that's not Judith McNaught's strong suits. I don't feel like she sticks the landings in any of her books that I read. My least favorite is Whitney, My Love. I know a lot of people really love Whitney, My Love. I was not one of them. I hated their relationship. Now, I feel like in between for Once and Always. I thought I was gonna be able to make it. My battery started dying. So anyway, where was I? I knew that there was going to be something about this book that I wasn't gonna like. That was very reminiscent of Whitney, My Love at the very first 2 chapters. So the heroine is Victoria, and we're introduced to her when she's only 14 years old. She lives in America. She lives in New York, I believe. And her mother and her father have an interesting relationship. She's just kind of discovering that they're having like some issues. So she goes outside and she plays with one of her friends. So Andrew is a couple years older than her. They kind of have this conversation, and she's talking about marriage because she just witnessed a scene with her parents and talking about how she wants to be in love or whatever. And Andrew, her childhood friend, basically says like, I do have to wait until you grow up, until you're 18, but I pretty much plan on marrying you. And so I was like, this is so reminiscent of Whitney, My Love, where the heroine was in love with like this guy, a childhood crush, and then this other guy comes in and it's not really a love triangle, not as much as Whitney, My Love, thank God. Glad that wasn't a super prominent relationship in this book, but still I didn't like it. So there is that aspect to the book. But when Victoria turns 18, her parents die. There's a tragic accident, and so now she and her sister are orphans. And they find out on her mother's deathbed, her mother said that she was actually a relation to some prominent English aristocrats. So the grandmother is contacted, but the grandmother only wants the younger sister because she thinks that Victoria looks too much like the mom who is a great disappointment, and she's like, I'm not taking her. The other nobleman that there is a connection with is a duke, and we find out that this duke was actually really in love with Victoria's mom, and so they have a history, and she knew that this duke would help her daughters out, and so the duke was like, oh yeah, Victoria can come live with me. I have the perfect match for her. She can marry my nephew, which is really his bastard son, who he let his younger brother and his wife take care of his son. So Jason is a grumpy hero. He's super grumpy. He's like, I don't want Victoria here. But the Duke has other plans and is like, oh, but I can't because like I announced your future marriage to Victoria. He wants his son to get married and produce an heir. And Jason has no desire to get married because he was already married before, not very happily, and he actually had a child who died as well. So he has some trauma in his past that he definitely doesn't want to open his heart up to Victoria at all. So they have a very antagonistic relationship. And the thing about it is, I liked Victoria's character for the most part. She's an 18-year-old girl. And I thought that she showed some really strong moments standing up to Jason whenever he was, you know, being an ass. But then it all kind of falls apart towards the end because, and this is a slight spoiler, once they do get married, she has gone toe-to-toe. She's been so outspoken with the things that she's been thinking about. She's never one to bite her tongue. She always tells Jason what she's thinking. And suddenly when they're married, she gets this advice before she goes to her wedding night, which is basically like, it's gonna hurt like a lot and it's gonna be in pain, but you're just gonna have to lie there anyway. So she's afraid, but her actual reaction when Jason walks into the room, she is kind of a little crazy. She's kind of like, don't touch me, get away from me. And he's like, what the fuck is going on? Like, we've actually kissed and made out and you've liked it, and all of a sudden she's being crazy and she won't communicate. She will not tell him, I'm afraid. I think this is gonna hurt. I've heard this is going to be terrible. And if she would have told him that, he could have been like, no, it's gonna be pleasurable. It might hurt a little bit, but it's not gonna be what you think it's gonna be. So anyway, it's kind of like Judith. I don't blame the characters. It's kind of like Judith McNaught forcing this situation where there's a misunderstanding, where it paints Jason in a light of being an absolute brute who forces her. And I'm just like, why do you like this, Judith McNaught? Why do you like to do that? We didn't need it. So I just feel like there's so much miscommunication after that. It's just so much. Because he's like, oh, she's gonna be like my wife and she's gonna want somebody else, and my ex-wife, the one who cheated on me. And so there's just a lot of assumptions being made. They won't talk to each other anymore, and I'm just like, where did all of that intense fire and like need to speak your mind to the other person, where did that all go? It disappeared at the end of this book, and so I wasn't super excited about it. So in the end, I'm going to rate this book 3 stars because it could have been a 4-star book, not a 5-star. It could have been a 4-star, but that whole ending act was just no. All right, guys, that is it for this weekly wrap up. I am playing catch up. I'm glad to be back on track so that hopefully this week I'll be able to just wrap up the books that I read this week. And I was definitely not going to do a big, long wrap up in one video because that was just too many books to do. Sorry about the sporadic postings, very busy, and probably going to be a little bit sporadic for the next month as well. But if you like this video, give it a big thumbs up, and if you're not already subscribed to my channel, make sure that you subscribe to get notified of any future videos that I do. Thank you so much for watching, and remember, life's better with a little HEA. Bye, guys.